told you leave me alone, Geography King. I got me a new man.
Hello, it's Kyle talking about the Caribbean nation of Grenada. It's a small country in the south part of the Caribbean. It's closer to South America than it is to Florida. My wife and I had an opportunity to visit there. We had a great time, and in this video, I want to go over some of the impressions that I had, some tips for visiting, and just some general information on the country. If you're planning on a trip to the Caribbean, you're not sure what island you want to go to, and Grenada is one of the ones you're considering. The country of Grenada is made up of three main islands. The island of Grenada is by far the largest and most populous of the three, but it is still pretty small. It's oval shaped, but it's only about 21 miles by 11 miles. But it's a gorgeous island. The interior is primarily mountainous rainforest, and there are some really nice beaches lining the coastal areas. The other two islands, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, are much smaller, but they're also very beautiful as well. And because they're part of the same country, you can get to the other two islands without needing to use your passport. When my wife and I visited, we visited both Grenada and Carriacou, and if you're to visit the country of Grenada, you'll probably want to do the same. It's not one of the most highly visited Caribbean islands. We were there in December, which isn't the height of tourist season, but it's not the low season either. And the crowds were surprisingly small. There weren't many folks on the beaches, the restaurants were pretty quiet, and my wife and I went on a couple of tours, and both times we were the only two people on the tour. So there were no big crowds when we were there in December. And there really aren't that many places to stay either, none of which are giant high rise hotels or big beach resorts. They're almost all just one or two level small properties. I think most of tourists are day trippers coming on cruise ships that are just spending the afternoon there. And there are more British tourists there than either Americans or Canadians. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's probably because when Americans go to the Caribbean, they're thinking about kind of a short flight to get to the tropics, and with Grenada being closer to South America than Florida, it is a longer flight than you might expect. And also, I think when most Americans go to the Caribbean, they're thinking about relaxing. They're thinking about sitting on a beach, drinking fruity drinks, maybe hitting a couple of bars and clubs, but not really doing much else. And you can certainly do that on Grenada, and we did plenty of relaxing and drinking on Grenada, but there's a lot more to do there too. So if you're looking to go to a tropical island where there's a lot more than just sit on the beach and drink fruity drinks, then Grenada would be a really good choice for you. The capital city of St. George's is by far the largest city in the country, but it is still pretty small. We were able to walk up and down pretty much every street in the city in less than a day, but there's a lot of stuff to see and do there. It's a pretty cool place to visit, and you'll want to spend an entire day there when you're visiting Grenada. There's a lot of history there. It's a really old city. There's some beautiful old architecture there. There's a nice old fort up on a hill you can tour. There's a nice waterfront district. There's some good restaurants there, a few cool art galleries. There's a really cool outdoor farmers market where you can pick up some tropical fruit, some really good tropical fruit juices, some spices. So it is a very hilly city, but because it is so small, you'll be able to walk pretty much the entire town without much problem. So yeah, you'll want to spend an entire day exploring the capital. St. George's is in the southwestern part of the island, and the main beaches are just southwest of that. And with the airport also being on that part of the island, the southwestern part of Grenada is probably where you're going to spend most of your time. The main beach is Grand Anse, and it is a beautiful stretch of white sands, really nice warm water out there. And again, it really wasn't very busy, and half the people on the beach were locals. There were some kids playing soccer, and it was pretty cool as an American to see people playing cricket on the beach, and there was a wedding going on. So it was just really neat to see that it was not just tourists out there. At one end of the beach was a local crafts market, which is worth checking out. There are some restaurants and bars right there, so you can have something to eat, have a few drinks, and then stumble back out to the water. So it's a real nice beach. Southwest of that is beaches that are even more secluded. A lot of folks think that Morne Rouge Beach is the most beautiful beach on the island, and it's hard to disagree with that. It's a gorgeous stretch of white sand also. But the beaches, other than Grand Anse, don't really have any amenities on them, so you'll want to bring your own food. There just isn't much to eat or drink at the other beaches, and some beaches have absolutely nothing there. So if you want to hit the beach, you're probably going to be spending your time in southwestern part of Grenada, but because there's so much more to do on the island than hit the beach, you'll want to visit other parts of the island as well. The interior of Grenada is primarily mountainous tropical rainforest, and you will definitely want to visit the interior while you're there. Grenada National Park is beautiful. It's really green, really lush. It's got a nice lake you can walk around. There are some other hiking trails within the park as well. And it's pretty close to St. George's. It's just a quick bus ride up the mountain. And outside the park, there's a spot called Annandale Falls, which is really pretty, but it's also very popular with both locals and with the cruise ship excursions. So if you are going to visit there, don't expect small crowds. But there are lots of other waterfalls you can hike to by putting on hiking boots and getting off the beaten path. There's a lot of cool stuff to see in the interior, so make sure you don't miss out on visiting the mountainous tropical rainforest while you're there. There are some pretty neat tours of facilities and agricultural areas you can take while you're there. And I know when you're on a vacation to a tropical paradise, you're not thinking about taking tours of facilities, but there are a few that are pretty cool and I think that are worth checking out. One of which is the Clark's Court Rum Distillery. Now, this is a pretty small distillery. This isn't, Bacardi or Captain Morgan or anything like that. This is pretty small stuff. And we had a private tour. There was nobody else there. So we got to see the distillery process. And at the end is, of course, the best part of the entire tour, and that's the rum tasting room where you can try out all the different types of rums they make there. And the tasting is free as long as you buy something, and you'll want to buy something. And we got this one, the old grog. This stuff is really, really good. I'm not a huge rum drinker, but this one is really, really good. I wish I would have bought more than just that bottle. So it is a pretty cool tour we're checking out. So if you want to see some, small time rum distillery, then this is a pretty cool one. It's really easy to get to by bus. I think it is worth checking out. Another place that we toured that we really enjoyed, I think is worth checking out, is the Belmont Estate. And that's on the eastern side of the island. It's the home of the Grenada Chocolate Company. They make really good organic chocolate there. It's a cocoa plantation and farm. And just like at the rum distillery, we had a private tour. There was nobody else there. So they showed us the chocolate making process and we tasted some raw beans and just, got a tour of the premises. You can also walk around on your own the other parts of the farm. There are some farm animals there and some tropical birds and some turtles and a little craft shop. It all sounds pretty lame, but it actually is pretty cool and we enjoyed our time there. There's a pretty good restaurant there. It's open air, it's a buffet, and it's a really good tropical fruit juices. So we just, enjoyed our time there. It's a 45-minute bus ride from St. George's, and that's part of the fun is just getting there because you're getting to see the entire island. You're going over the mountains, through the rainforest, through some small towns, and you get to see the real Grenada. So I do think it is worth checking out the Belmont Estate while you're there. Grenada's nickname is the Spice Island because of all the nutmeg and mace and cinnamon that it grows there. There's a place called the Laura Urban Spice Garden where you can check out the herbs and spices and how they grow and how they look. And it's kind of a cross between a farm and a botanical garden. And just like the Belmont Estate, it sounds pretty lame, but it actually is pretty cool and I think worth checking out. So if you're interested in some of the agriculture of the island, specifically the spices and the herbs, and do check out the Laura Urban Spice Garden. It's actually a pleasant surprise. No visit to the nation of Grenada would be complete without visiting one of the other islands that makes up the country. The second largest island is Carriacou, and I strongly recommend visiting there while you're on your trip to Grenada. There are two ways to get there. We took the ferry. It leaves from St. George's, takes about 90 minutes to get there, or you can take a really short plane ride on a plane about the size of a crop duster and it lands on a little tiny airstrip. It looks pretty freaky, but regardless of how you get there, I do recommend spending at least one night there. It's a little tiny island. It's only about 4 miles wide by about 4 miles long, but even though it is so small, I do recommend spending a day there because there's a lot more to see and do there than you might think. There are very few visitors on Carriacou, and the vast majority of them are just showing up for the afternoon. They'll arrive on the ferry at about 11 a.m. or so, stay for a few hours, and then the ferry leaves at 3. And that just isn't enough time to get to see the island, especially if you're like us, because we got sick on the boat ride over. So if we were only doing the 4-hour stay, then we wouldn't have gotten to see anything because we would have been sick the entire time. And there really aren't that many places to stay, all of which are just real small lodge, guest house kind of places. So that's a pretty good indication that the place isn't dominated by tourism, and all the more reason why you want to visit there. The main beach is called Paradise Beach, and even though it's the main beach, it's not at all crowded. We pretty much had the whole thing to ourselves. Just a really nice stretch of sand. The owner of the place we stayed at described the water as gin clear, which is a pretty accurate description because the water was gin clear. And there are a couple of open air bars that lead out to the sand. There were some fishermen just hanging out there, drinking a few beers, doing their thing. And It was just really laid back and relaxed. It felt more authentic because there's just no tourists there. And there are a lot of other real small beaches you can walk to that are kind of like just secret little cove beaches you can have all to yourselves. And from where we were staying, we were able to walk about 15 minutes to a gorgeous black sand beach that we had all to ourselves. And in a different direction, we walked about 15 minutes to a white sand beach. It was really beautiful. We actually spent more time on the beach on Carriacou than on Grenada just because we had these little kind of private beaches. And so if you want that kind of experience where you have your own little secret beach all to yourself, and you can definitely do that on Carriacou. I do want to mention a couple of things you'll need to know if you're visiting Grenada. The first is that you'll probably end up using the bus system a lot. The buses are actually just full-size Toyota vans. They're not much different than the full-size vans you see in the US, but Toyota doesn't export them to the US. But anyway, the bus system is really efficient, it's really easy to use, and it's also really cheap. And it can only be annoying a little bit. There was one time we had to wait for about 20 minutes or so in the hot, steamy van, a 15-passenger van with 19 people in it. The driver's waiting for one more person to squeeze in there. But I got the impression that long of a wait isn't too common because even the locals on the bus were kind of yelling at the driver to get going. So most of the time, we only had to wait for a few minutes. It really wasn't that big of a deal. And the buses are only really crowded right around St. George's, so it wasn't, it really wasn't that big of a deal. The only other time it was kind of annoying is when we took the bus all the way across the island to visit the Belmont Estate, and we had to stop and transfer in the town of Grenville. But again, that was actually kind of cool because there are no tourists at all in Grenville, so it's kind of neat to see a real Grenadian town that didn't have any tourists there. But yeah, get used to the bus system because you're probably going to be using it. I also don't recommend renting a car while you're there, and there are a few reasons for this. The first is that the roads are really narrow, really windy, and really mountainous as you go across the tropical rainforest. And the road conditions are perfectly fine. They're not full of potholes or anything, but the driving conditions are completely different than anything you would have in the US, Canada, or the UK. And also, you're really not going to go any faster. A lot of times, renting a car can be more efficient and a quicker way to get across the island or other places, but on Grenada, that really isn't going to be the case because the roads are, again, so windy and narrow. You're going to go pretty slow, and you're going to probably end up stuck behind a bus anyway, so you're not going to get much benefit out of renting a car in terms of speed. And the third reason why I recommend not renting a car is, and this is mainly for Americans and Canadians, that you drive on the left side of the road, and you probably don't want your first experience driving on the left side of the road to be on these windy, mountainous roads. So I really don't recommend renting a car because you're probably not going to need it. I also want to quickly mention just how incredibly friendly the people are there. And I know when you read something or see something about people in a foreign country that tourists go to, they'll always say that people there are friendly, but I thought people were almost like out of the way friendly. And a couple of examples are when my wife and I were walking around Carriacou, it was, we're just walking around this little tiny neighborhood in this small town, and there's no tourists there at all, but we had no idea where we were going. We could see the beach down the hill, but it was a big drop off on a cliff. And we were like, how did we get down there? So we're walking around this neighborhood. There are goats walking around the streets and dogs and stuff. And this lady comes out and she's like, hey, you guys looking for something? You lost? And we're like, well, we're trying to get down to the beach. We're not sure how to get there. She's like, hold on a second. And she goes inside the house and you hear her kind of yelling at somebody. And then you hear this, Mom. And then like a few seconds later, this 14-year-old kid comes out and she's like, my son will drive you down to the beach. And we're like, really? And so we hop in this kid's car. He drove us down there. So that was really cool. The other time, the first time we rode the bus, the driver was like, that'll be 10. And I thought, that was each. And my wife and I were on there. So I gave the guy 20. And then we're walking away. And then, a couple seconds later, I hear this, sir, hold, wait. And I turn around, there's this, guy pushing himself through the crowd. He's like, hey, you paid too much. Here's your change. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool too. And another example is that we were talking about, just what we were going to do that particular night. And one of the ladies working at the place we were staying at was like, hey, there's a big party going up, up the coast here. My friends and I are going to go. If you want, you can go with us. You can, we'll drive you up there. We'll have a good time partying up there with us. So, I just thought that was really cool too. And again, with the buses being super crowded, nobody stank. It was like, dude, everybody wore deodorant, which was very, that's much appreciated. And something else pretty interesting is nobody there smokes. I saw nobody smoking cigarettes except for tourists. And we went to the main grocery store on the island, and there was like a small section, like it might have been that big tops where they kept the cigarettes. And again, I saw nobody smoking but, tourists. And another thing that was really cool is that there was no litter. I mean, there was no litter anywhere. So just, the people being super friendly and just a really clean green island. They really respect the environment of their island. I just thought it was really cool. People there are awesome. We had a great time. So those are just some of the highlights and some of the best things to see and do while visiting Grenada. Of course, we didn't get a chance to see it all. We didn't visit the north shore of the island, and I know there are some nice beaches and some other cool things to see up there. We just didn't get a chance to see them. We also didn't visit the smallest of the 3 islands, which is Petit Martinique, but according to the locals, there's nothing to do there, and you would spend your time just kind of twiddling your thumbs. So if you're looking to do nothing on part of your vacation, there's plenty of nothing to do while on Carriacou. But I just really love Grenada. It's really just about the only English-speaking island in the Caribbean where you have huge beaches, you have mountainous rainforest interior, and there's a lot of cool things to do other than just sit on the beach. So if you're wanting to visit the Caribbean, you're not sure what island you want to visit, but you are looking to do more than just sit on the beach, then I do strongly recommend Grenada. You will have a great time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve. And if you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe to my channel. I'm posting videos about travel, all the stuff about road tripping, and just some cool geography stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out and about to go drink some soursop juice.